Miami homeowners, are you concerned about flooding? Are you concerned about the ecosystem here in Miami and what's to come? Well, I've got some answers for you. Today, I have Dr. Jeremy Kiszka of Florida International University. He's a marine biologist. He's the guy with the answers. He can at least give us some more information so that we can have our own informed opinions about this stuff. Dr. Jeremy, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Milton.
So I have a couple of questions here. There's a lot of people that have moved to Miami from all over the world and from different parts of the country. And our weather is prized and admired, and everybody wants to live in this beautiful paradise that we call home. But then people are concerned about, well, what about the flooding? What about the hurricanes? All these different things. It's new things to them, right? It's very, very strange. I don't think paradise comes with a price. I think most of the time it's a beautiful day, sunny, it's just gorgeous. Like right now, especially, it's just beautiful. But if I was a new resident here, what should I be concerned about? Should I be worried about my investment?
Yeah, well, I'm not only a professor interested in environmental sciences, but I'm also a homeowner here in Miami. Thanks to you, Milton. Obviously, there is a number of concerns that we can have. The first concern that I would have is, extreme weather events, because we're in the subtropical zone. And of course, we have a hurricane season. So this is something that, can concern people at times during the summer, during the wet season. The other thing that can be concerned about is flooding events that are associated with hurricanes. But the other thing that we can be concerned about is longer term changes that are affecting South Florida due to climate change. This is really one of the capitals of the world and of, the places that will be impacted by climate change and sea level rise, for example. It's really wise today to worry about it.
So what can a homeowner do to really have less of a worry? I talked to an insurance agent on what we can do to make our homes hard, right? Most of the homes down here are all made of hurricane impact, resistant materials, cement homes, CBS homes, cinder block construction. We have hip roofs. We have hurricane impact windows and doors. And some people have a generator. For the most part, I think we're pretty safe, at least more so than if a hurricane were to hit a state like New York, all the houses are made out of sticks, okay? I think we're safer in that regard, but down the road, flooding, how much of a concern is flooding? How much time do you think that we have? Is there anything that we can do as homeowners, as residents of Florida, or as concerned citizens to make it easier, make this paradise last longer?
Absolutely, no. And I think we still have some time. When I bought personally, the first thing that I was thinking about is elevation, and exposure to, and you probably remember, but exposure to flooding. I think this is the number one thing that I would personally be worried about, because water, we're aware of the damages that fire can have on properties, but I think water is equally, or not sure if that's worse, but this is definitely something that is looming. And in a number of areas, in Miami Beach, we see the recurrence of flooding events that are due to a combination of factors such as king tides, but also sea level rise. So, I think if I was a new home buyer, which I was last year, I would be concerned about elevation.
Yeah. So try not to buy in a flood zone if you can. I tell my clients the same thing. First off, I don't want the unnecessary expense of flood insurance, although you don't have to just be in a flood zone to buy flood insurance. You can buy flood insurance anywhere. And some people do, some of my clients do. But I own multiple properties here in Florida. I don't own any of them in a flood zone because I don't want to have the worry of flooding. The good thing about South Florida, from what I've noticed in the 22 years or so that I've lived here, is when water comes in, it goes out. It's like a limestone we're sitting on, right? It's not like water's hanging out. It doesn't flood, and then all of a sudden, what are we going to do? We need to get rescued. It's in and it's out. It comes in, it recedes. And then we also have the Everglades, which is one of the things when I first lived in Weston, I saw that right before a hurricane, they pumped all the water out, right? And they pumped it into the Everglades. How does that happen? How does that work?
That I don't know how exactly.
That's an engineering question, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Natural risks is, not so much my expertise, although I know a little bit, but just so you know, we have sort of domesticated the water in the Everglades for decades and more, and, even centuries.
Yeah.
Right now, what we're trying to do, especially with the Everglades restoration project, is restore the water flow. And, everything is compartmentalized, with all these canals. Now, what the restoration program aims at is, restoring the flow between Lake Okeechobee to the Everglades to try to give a sort of like more natural flow of the Everglades and try to restore the Everglades the way it was 400 years ago.
So, and king tide, that phenomenon that we've been experiencing, I don't think we had it last year, I think because of the flow. It's from the farming in Lake Okeechobee, all the water goes into the Okeechobee, and then they've got to like put it through the locks, and they were diverting it down to the sides of Florida instead of through its natural flow, which was putting way too many nutrients and fertilizer into the oceans, causing those red tide blooms, correct?
So that's the red tides. And, the red tides, what we also call the harmful algal blooms. Algal blooms, whenever you have all these bloom of algae, occur naturally. And they're actually, in many cases, they're good for ecosystems because then they sustain the marine food web. Okay, but in some cases, you have species producing toxins, and these toxins can affect fish, they can affect the shellfish that we consume, and they can also affect wildlife, birds, turtles, manatees, and so forth. And, the other thing is that these HABs that we call the HABs, but most people call them red tides, also affect the economy in a quite dramatic way. And the Florida Gulf Coast is repeatedly, I wouldn't say every year, but, it tends to increase. The occurrence of these events tends to increase, and that's because of all the nutrients that
and that affects the fishing industry.
It affects pretty much every part of the ecosystems. So the species that we eat, and also the resources, not necessarily the consumptive resources that we rely on, but Florida equals like tourism. And whenever you have red tides, it's a disaster for tourism. Yeah, we need to keep them under control, and it's far from being easy.
As a homeowner, what could we do to have less of an effect on that huge nutrient dump that occurs?
I would give one main advice for people owning a house and having a lawn. One of the main recommendations that we make is to avoid fertilizers during the wet season, during the rainy season. Why? Because then all these fertilizers, including, that have huge loads of nutrients, will go then in the waterways, in the canals, and then go to the ocean. Everything that you do on land has potentially an impact in the coastal waters. So reduce or eliminate any fertilizers on your lawn during the wet season. Use them during the dry season in the winter. That would definitely reduce the problem dramatically.
So October through March, we can fertilize, and then don't fertilize any other month.
No, during the wet season it's really disastrous.
Okay, that's pretty good advice. That's something that everybody can do. Now, Miami has had a huge amount of construction on the coastline. Like, we're known for our beaches. We're known for our coastline. Do you think that the construction on the coastline, all that sediment, all that debris, is it affecting our bay? And what can we do to mitigate that?
So Miami has experienced like massive construction for a long time, better than I do.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult to mitigate that at this point because most of the coastline in the greater Miami area is urbanized. There's limited sort of, space for nature. Although we tend to replant native Florida plants and trees, which is great because it really eliminates a lot of problems. Whenever we're in the warm season, having trees providing shade, if you keep your trees around your property, although, you need to keep
them away from the roof.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, they provide massive shade. I have like 3 oak trees around my property. I take care of them, and of course they produce leaves, but the benefit is my bill is so low. Birds also nest in the trees, which is great. And hawks nest in the trees, which eliminate the problems of rats and mice.
There you go.
No, exactly. So this is very important to consider. So, difficult to cope with, all the construction, but at your scale as a homeowner, there are little things. Planting native species of plants, Florida plants and trees is a great thing to do.
And that's good for the bees too, right? Like when you have non-native species in your lawn, it's like our local fauna, flora, they can't use all this stuff, right? It's like, I might eat caviar, but that doesn't do anything for them, right? It's like if you have a flower from like the middle of the country or from a different country altogether in your garden, it's too exotic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you have a lot of species I found, like species from Madagascar, from Eastern Africa here. Let's try to use those native species to sort of reshape our backyards and give them a more like Floridian touch.
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily mean palm trees.
Exactly.
I'm actually going to be redoing the landscape in the new home, and that's one thing that I really want to do is use native Florida plants that are sustainable. They don't necessarily need to be watered all the time too, like using plants that are hardy and don't require such maintenance because they're from here, right? They're used to this climate, and that's better for the animals, and it's better for our properties. It's better on my water bill.
Your water bill, it's huge. Like there's some plants that are really extreme costly whenever it comes to watering them. So yeah, take into account those different factors whenever you're sort of shaping your lawn.
Let's talk about manatees. What are they? And where are they? And what can we do to bother them less?
It's a very interesting question because I mostly work with marine species, particularly marine mammals like manatees. These are close relatives to elephants, surprisingly.
I did not know that.
Yeah, these are the largest herbivores in our coastal waters. They eat plants, they eat seagrass, they eat algae. And whenever we talk about red tides and nutrient pollution in our coastal waters, well, last year we had a record number of manatees, more than 1,000 dying, and that's more than 10%, 15% of the manatee population in the entire state of Florida that died of starvation. The reason being seagrass, their primary source of food, are dying. And dying because of what? Because of nutrient pollution. All the nutrients that we're dumping in our coastal waterways are affecting, these blooms of algae. It consumes a lot of oxygen in the water, and then the seagrass at the bottom don't have any oxygen to survive. The water is turbid because of all these algae in suspension. Seagrass die, all the ecosystem die, and manatees die.
No wake zones. Where do you find manatees? Because like I've been on a couple of boats sometimes, like a no wake zone. Is that more for the residents, or is it for the residents of the water?
So, the no wake zone are primarily for safety. That's to cross, certain areas, you have to reduce speed, no wake, which means that you're not producing that wave. But you also have manatee zones, and manatee zones are actual protection zones because these animals are very slow and they're extremely susceptible to boat strike or jet ski strikes. The bay, like in the Miami area, we have Biscayne Bay, it's a very important habitat for manatees, but you have a tremendous amount of boat and jet skis. And sometimes, especially during the weekend, it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's everyone for themselves. And I think that most people think that the bay is very deep, but I've been in a boat in the bay. It's like 4 foot.
Yeah. 4 feet, 6 feet at most. It's a very shallow bay. And, it's a very important habitat for manatees because a lot of, most of their food is found there. Every so often, they're going to go upstream in the rivers because they need to drink fresh water.
They have to drink fresh water?
Yeah, that's the reason why I'm telling you they're close relatives.
This is complicated. It's not easy being a manatee.
A manatee, they have to face food depletion. Their seagrass are disappearing. In the winter, they have to cope with cold temperatures. So they have to go to warm water refuges in the rivers. Then they have to drink. They have to avoid the boats. They are getting anywhere they go. So you know what? Let's not take manatees for granted in Florida because that's one of the biggest and charismatic species in the state, but they're definitely today at risk.
What can we do to bring back the seagrass?
There's a few things that you can do, avoid the use of nutrients and fertilizers in your lawn, or avoid to do it during the wet season, during the rainy season, the summer. Be a responsible boater. Avoid stepping on seagrass, avoid boating in too shallow waters because, with your propeller, you can create cuts and, alter the seagrass bed and, really respect the manatee zones. The fines are pretty high, goes up to $25,000 and 6 months in prison.
We're not high enough.
If you hurt a manatee, so they're really protected species, but again, that's not enough. These animals might not survive, in the next 30, 40 years.
To all the new residents of Florida, take care of the manatees. Don't step on the seagrass. Don't fertilize your lawn during the rainy season. That's not a lot to ask.
No, there's a lot to do. Interesting thing for the new homeowner. Whenever you buy a home, it's a huge investment. So as a new homeowner, you're going to try to also save some money sometimes. And, by saving water, using mostly native plants, having impact windows, you're going to save energy and reduce the consumption of energy. Energy comes from power plants, fueled by coal. That increase, carbon emissions. Everybody needs to do its job actually to try to reduce our impact on the environment.
We all got to do our part.
Oh yeah.
But so what is your outlook on everything here in Miami, on the ecosystem, on the weather patterns? Are we doing enough? Do you have a positive outlook? Are we going to keep this beautiful paradise that we call home?
My attitude, my response to that will be, personally, I want to stay in Miami as long as I can, my entire life. I love South Florida. I want to work in South Florida. I want to live here. I bought a first home. I might want to buy another one in the future. No, I think it's a great place to live. The quality of life that we have here is amazing, but let's not take everything for granted. The great thing about Miami is we have a great and vibrant, young and growing city. But we also have amazing natural ecosystems. We have the Everglades, we have Biscayne Bay, we have some amazing species that we can see. You can see panthers, bobcats, bears inland, and on the coastline, you can see dolphins and manatees very easily. So it's a chance, and we just need to take care of it, and every single household can play a role. Well,
thank you so much for your insights and for your expertise and for answering our questions. Now, can people follow you on Instagram? Can they see what you're up to? They can't all be your students, right? So
no, absolutely. No, they can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I have a website, the Marine Conservation Ecology Lab at FIU. It's easy to find me if you use Google.
Well, I'm going to put all your information down here so that people can follow you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything. Guys, if you like this content, please like and subscribe below. I'm Milton Andrade, over and out. Thanks again. Take care.